Hello and what is up, my friends? It's ThunderBob here, and tonight we're going to be checking out some more Diablo 4. I have been away for about a week. I've been traveling from my home in Florida, flew into North Carolina, drove through the Virginias up to Deep Creek, Maryland, and we stayed on the water for a week. It was beautiful, but I am back. I have been playing Diablo 4 on my Steam Deck in the evenings, kind of during our downtime, and I'm thinking I'm maybe like 10 levels from where I was the last time I did a video. And I've made a ton of changes to this Chain Lightning Crackling energy, like infinite build. I think it is like so much better right now. In this video, I'm going to show you my build, my items, some different variations on this you could play around with. And then I'm going to run through a nightmare dungeon that is 10 levels above me. I'm level 81. This is a level 91 nightmare dungeon. I'll show you the type of dungeon it is when it starts off, but it's really, it's not giving me any bonuses to my damage, but there's not also a lot of really negatives. So this feels like a pretty good, fair comparison. And I do it in about 9 minutes. I think that's pretty good for a Nightmare Dungeon 10 levels ahead of me. Let's quickly go through the build and the gear. I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible, but I still usually talk too long, so my apologies. I am a little bit weird. Everyone tells me that I should use Frostbolt and Firebolt. I have not gone the Firebolt route. I have found Fireball has been really good, especially with some of the changes I've made to this build. And basically, the more enemies that I can group together, the better I think Fireball is. And Blizzard's been talking about increasing density. I think when they increase density, this enchantment is going to be even that much better. But I'm going to show you the spec real quick here. 2 points, one in Frostbolt and just one in the enchantment. It doesn't matter, you can put 2 in Frostbolt just to get the enchantment slot and to move on to the next skills. And I'm a little bit weird here. I got 5 points in Fireball. This is just for the enchantment, and then this also gives all my Fireballs that extra critical damage, which is pretty huge. And this does work on the enchantment. And then we got 5 points in Chain Lightning, and I've got +4 plus from gear. So it's doing, 10,000 damage right now, but it crits, depending on what effects I have in place, for anywhere from 50 to, I've seen 200,000 at this point, and I don't even have top gear. Got this for the extra mana, and this because I'm almost always above 100 mana. So this is almost always in effect. So this is just like a straight 9% damage increase, no real negatives. Move down. We put 1 point basically everywhere here. These are so high because I've got a lot of plus skills, and got down to the extra life. This is one that you could change. So this build was originally based off of Crackling Energy. I've kind of, as I'm pushing Nightmare Dungeons, I need all the damage reduction I can get. I'm finding that it's not damage as much the problem, dealing damage, but taking damage. So when I'm pushing Nightmare Dungeons, I go to the damage reduction. But when I'm just like having fun, like doing Hell Tides, and the Hell Tides are only 3 levels above, it's pretty easy at this point. I'll switch back to the additional hits, because Crackling Energy, with the setup I have right now, I've seen them crit for 20, 30, 50,000 damage. Like, they just buffed Crackling damage from 15% to 20%. That's a 25% damage increase when you think about it. And this is just like free damage. I don't have to, I just pick up the orbs and they happen. So I really have been pushing Crackling Energy, and I think when I get to 99, I might try going full Crackling Energy again. But it's just kind of like bonus damage. If you're pushing Nightmare Dungeon, I would probably go with the damage reduction. If you're just like in the overworld having fun, it's a lot of fun to use this one. I've got Glass Cannon, a lot of increased damage. This is one area, if you find yourself dying a lot, you may want to scale back points here. But I like the damage. We've got the extra mana regeneration. Of course, we go down to Mystical Frost Nobler for the vulnerable, which is like critical for just about any sorcerer. I think that's one problem, is the sorcerer is tied to certain skills more than the other classes. This is like our only really great source of vulnerability, and it's such a good skill. But I feel like you can't not take it. It's like that good is the problem. I got 1 point here. 1 point I find is enough for it to trigger pretty frequently, so I haven't gone any further. I don't have anything here except for all these defensive skills. These are some of the best skills for staying alive in the game. And you could actually scale back align the elements. There's a couple places you could kind of put points here or there, but this is great. If you think about it, with 3 points, If you don't get hit by an elite for 10 seconds, the next time you encounter one, you have a 30% damage reduction. It only takes, 15 seconds to get to that max. And yeah, that's a pretty big damage reduction. And elites are the ones that deal the most damage to you. So that's pretty critical. This is probably my favorite defensive skill in the game. It also helps with any kind of barrier synergy you've got with your items. There's so many things that trigger off of barriers. And then this is great. I'm just constantly casting Chain Lightning, which is an expensive skill. So this is basically always up. It's just a straight 15% damage reduction in my eyes. Going down, I did scale back a little bit on my shock kind of sub-skills here. I got 1 point in this really just to get down to Invigorating Conduit for the Crackling Energy, which I really don't even need anymore. At this point, I've kind of gone infinite on mana. But Crackling Energy gets spawned so frequently because of this one skill, because I have a 100% crit rate almost always. So every time I cast Chain Lightning, I usually see a couple of Crackling Energies pop out. This is just kind of useless because I've already got so many from my Chain Lightning. Like, this is... If I could get this without this, I would. I think Shocking Impact's actually bugged. So I just got Raiments of the Infinite recently, and I'm really loving this item. And it stuns whenever you teleport. But I've noticed that, and I've watched for this, like I was really testing it, it never triggers Shocking Impact. I also noticed, if you look, it says 50% damage, and it's doing about 1,000. Teleport is doing 45% damage, is doing 7,200. How is 15% only 1,000 damage? And I don't have, like, any great source, something that would be impacting one and not the other. So I think Shocking Impact's bugged, not just in the damage listed here doesn't seem right, it also just doesn't seem to trigger off the stun from Raiments of the Infinite. So if you've got any thoughts on that, let me know. Keep moving down here. I am doing a lot of chilling. So I've got Hoarfrost, I've got 6 because my amulet's giving me some extra. This basically is just a straight 80% damage increase. And then I've got 36% damage to, frozen enemies when I frost over them. Just a really huge damage increase. Unstable Currents, this is just like my I win button. Whenever I run into a big pack of elites, this is usually what gets me through it. And then this is another one that you could switch. So when I'm pushing Nightmare Dungeons, I've switched to Veer's Mastery. Just because this gives me like a constant 25% damage reduction to close enemies. And the way I'm playing right now, that is like every pack. So this plus this is a huge survivability bonus, because this is almost always active. I'm teleporting with about a 5-second cooldown. So like 75% of the time this is up. And then I'm almost always in close proximity to my enemy. So I'm getting a huge damage reduction plus that extra damage. If I'm just in the overworld, just killing stuff, Crackling Energy is really nice, and that cooldown reduction is really nice. So, like, if I'm just messing around in the overworld, I switch to Overflowing Energy. When I'm pushing Nightmare Dungeons, like, to the peak, like right now I'm doing plus 10, that's when I go to Veer's Mastery. So that's the basic skills. We'll look at the gear, and then I will go to Paragon real briefly. And I have changed up my aspects almost completely. This used to be on my amulet because it gives you plus 75% at that point. I've moved it over. Armor's really nice, but for this build to work, I really needed something else on the amulet. I needed this one that gives me additional crit rate. So the way I have this build, I've got 150 mana, and I've got a ton of mana regeneration. And I'm almost always above 100 mana. So I'm almost always at 57% increased critical strike. And my base is 34%. So I'm approaching 100%. I'm about at 90% right now. Now, when this was on the weapon, I was at 100%. But I changed it out for this, that you deal additional damage to immobilized, stunned, or frozen. The reason I changed this is because I got Raiment of the Infinite. This is a really, really easy source of stun. So now I've got an easy source of stun. I've got Frozen Nova for the easy source of frozen. And then I've got on my boots this one that will immobilize enemies when I Flame Shield and walk through them. So now I have a source of all 3 stun, freeze, and immobilize. And this stacks. So if I teleport into a group of enemies, they all get pulled together. They are taking 66% more damage. In most cases on basic enemies, that teleport just killed them. If it didn't, I've got Frost Nova. That stacks. Now I'm doing 100 and what, almost 30% damage. If they're still alive, if I hit my Flame Shield, they are taking a additional 66% damage. This one imprint increases my damage so much. Like I'll watch my Chain Lightning go from 50,000 damage to 100,000 damage to 200,000 damage just by applying these different crowd control effects. So this is really, really powerful, and I think on the weapon it is most powerful because it gets doubled. So that's why I switched. So really, you have to look at your stats. You want to get as high crit as you can. If you can manage it on like your amulet, or if you get, let's say, to 50% crit, you could probably drop this to like a ring or something. I was also using the one that gives you extra bounces on your Chain Lightning, and I dropped that over time. Let's just go through here one more time. So we've got extra armor. I've got Raiment of the Infinite, which is giving me that stun every time I teleport, which is just, it's really critical for this build. I've got this, so I'm dealing 19% increased damage based on available resource, which is almost always above 100. So this is basically just 19% increased damage all the time. I was using the one that gives you increased damage when you have a barrier up, but I was finding there were times where I didn't have a barrier, and this actually just works better. Double Frost Nova, really good. I should probably get a better version of this, but yeah, Frost Nova is probably one of the most critical skills. And then that one for Flame Shield that immobilize enemies. Again, increased crit chance on that aspect. We've got the ring. These rings are why I don't have mana issues. So this one will give you 4 whenever you crowd control an enemy. And as I said, I've got Frost Bolt on my one of my enchantments. So basically everything I hit is crowd controlled. So this is really nice. It also works with Frost Nova. You Frost Nova, every enemy that you Frost Nova gives you 4 resource. That stacks. So bam, I just chilled them. That gives me 4 mana for each one. I Frost Nova, that gives me 4 mana for each one. I teleport, that gives me 4 mana for each one because it's stunning. Those are all separate. And then actually even Flame Shield, now that it immobilizes, that will give me 4 mana for every enemy that is impacted. That is crazy. I was using this for quite a while, and I dropped it because with this I basically have infinite mana as long as there are enemies around. And then I switched to this one. The each time Chain Lightning bounces off you, you get 5 mana. So basically, this gives me infinite mana when I'm surrounded by enemies. This gives me infinite mana when I'm taking on a boss, when I'm taking on a single target. I don't really need this anymore. This is still really nice, and it's a good alternative if you don't have this setup. But at this point, I don't need it, I don't think. Like, there's very rarely a time where I'm beside of energy completely, and if I am, well, I grab a couple of the orbs, and I'm full of energy again. So, there are different ways to maintain this build. You really need that full mana to make it work. But, you know, those are the options I'm using right now. I really wish I could... This is a pretty high damage weapon. It's 818 item power. But the stats on it could be better. I would love critical strike, not just lightning critical strike, but just flat critical strike on top of it too. I was using a weapon that had lower damage, but better stats on it. But the higher damage actually seemed to impact more. So I would really love a bit more critical strike damage. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, go and use Fireball and come down to Devouring Blaze. But I'm going to show you as we're playing why I think Fireball is really critical, especially when you're talking about large groups of enemies. Let's quickly look at the Paragon boards. Excuse me. I think I caught something while I was on my trip. Tier 1 board, kind of basic, go through here. I'm using Frostbite. I'm leveling this one up right now. I'm almost got to the next tier where I can grab all these willpower, which should then make this increase substantially. This will probably be giving me 100% damage in 2 or 3 more nightmare dungeons. We come up here. This is the Icefall one, so I've got this, which just gives me more barriers, just keep me alive more. I might drop this later. It's not the most beneficial, but I've been enjoying playing around with it. This also gives me damage reduction against chilled enemies. I'll probably put a couple more points into these so I can get 6 more damage reduction, because everything I fight is chilled. So this is huge damage reduction. 30% damage to chilled enemies, 30% damage to chilled enemies. This is the one that gives me crackling energy damage. Mostly I've just been messing around with crackling energy. I don't know if this is necessarily the best one in the world, but it's a lot of fun. And before long, when I level this up, this will probably be doubling my crackling energy damage. And I'm already doing 25, 30,000 damage of crackling energy. So I could see a point where crackling energy actually outpaces my my chain lightning. That'll be fun. We'll get there eventually. And we come across, and this is Ceaseless Conduit, which is the crackling energy one, so it doesn't use a charge sometimes and increases damage at this point by 74%. So between these two, that's like 125% crackling energy damage. We got the ones for crackling energy and lightning damage, crackling energy intelligence. I'm using the crowd control glyph. This gives me 110% against crowd control enemies, which is basically every enemy. Everything I do crowd controls, as we talked about. So that's a huge damage increase. I went up from there. I've got these mostly for the increased mana. I'm not going to go all the way through this tree. I kind of want this now that I have Ram into the Infinite, and I might change this around. I really need to just take like a couple hours and go through here. I think I could optimize a few things. But I just dropped in the non-physical damage one. I also like the destruction one, but the only reason I haven't is because it only impacts core skills. And in this build, as you'll see, teleport is doing a ton of damage. Crackling energy is doing a ton of damage. This really only impacts my chain lightning, and I believe my fireball. I'm not 100% on that. I think when I get to the next board, I'll probably go with destruction at that point. But this is this one, the non-physical damage one, impacts like all of my damage, not just my core skills. So I thought that might be more beneficial at this point. But that's where I'm at. I'm going to work up and get the stun damage because I'm dealing so much stun. And then I'll probably work my way around here, grab Static Surge, and work my way back north. I don't think I'll grab, the resistance ones are kind of useless, but I'll probably get the stun and elite damage. So my thought is like, go out that way, and then I'll grab a glyph for destruction, grab this, and then I think I'm getting pretty close to being maxed. I've only got 19 levels left. And then filling in the couple of points to max out all my glyphs in the previous trees. That might be it. When I finally get to 99, I will post like my final Paragon setup, but that is where I'm at right now. I know there's probably some tweaks I could make. If you got any thoughts and something I'm missing here, let me know. I am still leveling these glyphs, obviously. I've only got, 15, 13, 9, 8. Yeah, so I'm still working on that. But that's where I am right now. My skills, my gear, my Paragon. We're going to run through this Nightmare Dungeon in 9 minutes or so, 10 levels above me. And if you got any thoughts, let me know. Alright, just briefly, here are the stats for this monster dungeon. You could pause it there, but it's nothing really critical. I'm not getting extra lightning damage. I'm not losing any damage. The biggest thing is that stupid rock following me. It's kind of... I have good maneuverability with this build, luckily, but it kind of messes me up at times where, like, the reason I went Fireball is because you get a bunch of enemies together and they kind of all explode at once. Like, I've seen a lot of builds lately that have been taking, like, Frozen Orb. This guy will not die. You get a Frozen Orb like 20% of your casts, whereas Fireball, every single cast... every single time you kill something, Fireball goes off. Like, right there, did you see that? I killed one guy and everyone died at the same time. And this build is all about using Ram into the Infinite to pull everyone together. And in most cases, that teleport will kill at least one enemy, triggering Fireball, triggering everything in that circle to die. It's pretty great. And you'll see that a lot here. Like, I just pull a bunch of guys together. I keep getting stunned by something. I think it's these spiders. You'll see me pull, a group of enemies together, and then they instantly just melt. Like, usually I don't even have to cast Chain Lightning. Sometimes you run into, like, damage resistant, or the guys with the extra health, and it's a little bit more. You have to cast a couple times. You might use Unstable Currents in those situations. But even, like, the random elites, I usually don't need to do that. Usually it's Teleport, and then if it's, a dangerous pack, Frost Nova, and maybe hit Flame Shield, and they're taking, triple damage at that stage. And, yeah, pretty sure everything does. Like, here I'll hit my Unstable Currents, and everything just died. You know. And these guys are 10 levels higher than me. I realize I'm not quite at, you know, level 100 yet. But I don't, you know, obviously I don't know the, man, I almost died there. Like I said, that little rock thing, kind of annoying for this build, especially when I'm trying to pick up gear and it's just sitting on the gear. What I was saying, I don't know how the scaling goes all the way to 99. This is my highest character. I have been playing this kind of, you know, at my own pace. And, you know, I've got a full-time job, I got family and everything. I know everyone says that I'm a dad, but it's true. I only play, you know, maybe 10 hours a week right now, and I've had a whole lot going on in my life. I had a family member die, and just a lot of stuff going on, traveling, and I'm actually going to a funeral service this weekend. So I'm playing at my own pace, but I'm really enjoying it, and, you know, I'm not following a build guide. I'm kind of designing this as I go, and as I figure out new stuff, I'm definitely sharing it. So I'm not making like a video of every single moment of my journey, but like the major points where I'm like, hey, I figured out a new angle to this build, maybe people want to try this out. That's kind of the stuff I'm sharing. So the basics here are you get your group of enemies. You know, if it's one enemy, a lot of time I'll just skip it. You know, you find a large group of enemies, you teleport on top of them, and I keep getting the spiders spit out the webbing. I'm trying to get a big group of enemies to demonstrate. This might do. So use Frost Nova or use your teleport to pull them all together. If they're spread out, you can like strategically use your teleport. And that's one thing, I've been playing on the Steam Deck for the last week. And it's one thing I immediately noticed when I jumped to the computer is teleport and Rayman of the Infinite is like 1,000,000 times better on PC than on Steam Deck or on console. Just because teleport is so much easier to aim. Oh, this is going to be a good example. This will have a lot of enemies. So just watch, you know, how this scales the more enemies appear on the screen. You'll just see so much damage going off. You won't even be able to like identify the source of it. But that teleport, when you're on console or on Steam Deck, you kind of just like point in the direction you want to go and it auto aims for you. And it's really hard to get into the right position where you want to pull enemies together or you want to avoid damage. Like on the PC with the mouse, I find the control so much more granular. Like right there, like it was so easy to just bounce out of the, you know, the little sphere of destruction that thing has. But on the Steam Deck, you know, it might have aimed at that little rock outcropping that was still within the damage radius. So I find this build works much better with a mouse and keyboard, but it's still usable. I've been using it on the Steam Deck for the last week, and I've actually probably spent more time on this build on the Steam Deck than on my PC. And this is going to be like a pretty good example. This is one of those slay all enemies, so guys will just keep teleporting to me as I'm going. Ancestral. I'm still trying to find a good weapon, so you're going to see me picking up like every single ancestral staff. But this should spawn like a large amount of enemies on me pretty frequently. And once one guy dies, they all should just explode. And that's something I think is unique to Fireball, because every single enemy that dies triggers it. So the more enemies you have, and especially the more enemies that you can pull together tightly, the better the Fireball enchantment is. And like having another source, I think it's doing like 44% damage here. Having another automatic source of damage on everything, it's basically like a half of a corpse explosion on every single enemy that you kill. Imagine, you know, the choice of having 30% more critical hit damage or having you know, corpse explosion on every single enemy you kill. I don't know, it's like people just keep telling me to use Firebolt, but I'm finding Fireball very, very effective. The only thing on bosses is not particularly great. But I don't have problems with bosses. Once you get them, and I'll show you that in a minute, once you get the boss to stagger, and they're impacted by all crowd control abilities, I pretty much one-shot the boss. And I'll show you that here in a moment whenever we get to the boss. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that hurt me. It's like you're doing okay damage, you stagger them, they instantly melt. It's crazy. Like I saw a video of a sorcerer fighting Lilith, and it was the same way, like slow damage. Oh, they got them to stagger, literally Lilith just died. And it's kind of problematic because I feel like this aspect is almost like a requirement to be effective as a sorcerer, and that's problematic in that it limits build diversity, it limits play styles. I think I like the aspect system, and I like a lot of things about the game, but I feel like some are too powerful, and in some cases there's not all the aspects that there should be. Like, there's very few aspects that some skills could rely on, and then some skills have a ton, and it doesn't always make sense. And sometimes, you know, like the frost one that everyone's using right now, like, it lets it pierce, and it only decreases the damage by a small amount per pierce. Whereas, you know, you got some that just straight up like the fireball one, straight up just makes fireball. The bouncing one just makes it useless because it lowers the damage so much. Like, why would anyone ever use that? And it's, in some cases, I think they just didn't playtest this at the high end. And I'm sure that'll come in time, like thinking back to Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. Like, the way Diablo 2 released, everyone reveres that game, and it's still probably my favorite game of all time. I still haven't, I don't think this game has surpassed that. I still think Diablo 2 is probably the better game, as someone who played it at release. But Diablo 2 at release was kind of a mess. You know, there were no runes. You know, gear was much more limited. There wasn't even elite items, if you remember. It was just normal and exceptional. And it's like, it took Diablo 2 an expansion and a whole bunch of patches to get, I think, where eventually it wound up. And I think Diablo 4, you know, given some time, given a few seasons, given an expansion or two, could be that good. Now watch this, when I stagger him. And one thing that's nice is now I've got another source of stun, I've got another source of immobilize, so I can stagger that much more quickly, and it is not happening as quickly as I'd like it to. There, staggered. Dead. That's crazy. They need to work on that. Alright, well, I'm going to end it here. I am just going to include like 2 minutes while I talk about the last of my thoughts here of me running an even higher level dungeon. This was 15 levels higher than my current level. This was 96 when I was level 81, and I finished it, but I did die a couple of times. It wasn't quite as clean, so I didn't include the whole run, but just to show you kind of pushing even higher levels. And I think as I get just a couple more Paragon points and I get a couple of glyphs leveled up, it should become easier and easier, hopefully, as I get to level 100, but we will see as I push all the way to the max level. But, you know, right now a 10 to 15 is not out of the range of possibility. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this build. I'm not saying it's the best in the game or best in the world, but the playstyle is really fun. It's like you move a lot, you teleport around, you use teleport offensively, you use all of your cooldowns really effectively. It's just a really enjoyable build, and it's fun both for pushing nightmare content, and also it's really effective at like hell tides and kind of mid-level stuff. Like, I can literally just run across the world, I shoot one lightning out, and it tracks all the enemies. You don't really have to go hunting things down. Yeah, it's just really fun. And yeah, I'm gonna end it here. If you've got any thoughts, suggestions for the build, please drop me a comment below. This is something I built myself. You know, I really don't go watch a lot of guides. This is just kind of organically as I've gone from level 1 to now level 82. How I'm playing, and yeah, if I'm missing anything, if there's any aspects or skills or something that you think might help, let me know. I'm going to be traveling again. I've been doing so much traveling. I have a funeral for an uncle that passed this upcoming Saturday. I'm going to be again out of my house for a couple of days, playing on the Steam Deck and whatnot, and I'll probably do another follow-up video next week, hopefully being level 100 or close to it. Again, I do want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please do like, subscribe, and again, drop me a comment with your thoughts. Have a good night, everyone. Talk to you later.